Yes, we are going to take study section 3 on boss 323. And study section 3 is forecasting concepts. At the end of this study section, you should be able to give the definition of forecasting, explain what demand management is about. You should be able to state the time horizon in forecasting. You should be able to describe the characteristics of forecast. And lastly, you should be able to state and explain various types of forecasting. Those are the things you are expected to know at the end of the study section. We are starting off with the definition of forecasting. Forecasting can simply be defined as the use of the past and the present data in order to project or predict future data. So where you are using the past and the present data to predict future data, you are basically referring to as forecasting. So forecasting can simply be said as the use of previous and current data in order to predict future data. So it can simply be put in this way, that this is defined as the prediction of future events based on the currently available information of the past and the present. You can further say that forecast is the use of the past and present events to predict future events. So what is important here is that when you are talking about forecast, you must be relying on the past data and the present data in order for you to forecast or to predict. Then we'll move on to demand management. When you talk about demand, demand is the quantity of a product a consumer is willing and able to buy at a particular time, place, and at a given price. How do you manage the demand of your product when consumers are coming to demand for your product? You have to take note that the demand for your product may be uncertain and may be certain with some degree of certainty. But when you cannot predict the level of demand for your product, then you need to make provisions in such a manner that you'll be able to meet the demand of your customer at every point in time that they come to demand for your product. So the ability to bring in your management intellectual skill to meet the demand of your customers at every point in time is what we refer to as demand management. The ability of the managers, the ability of the management to put on a strategic plan in place in order to meet the demand of their customer and ensure proper delivery of goods. That is basically what we refer to as demand management. We put it in this way, that this is the ability to blend a proactive mix with change in quantity demanded so that the productive system can be optimally and effectively utilized and the product or services delivered at the right time and in good condition. What it simply means is your ability to put your management skills in place in order to meet the demand of your customer at every point in time. And that is what we refer to as demand management. You may be proactive in your demand management or you may be passive. You are proactive is that when you plan ahead of the demand for your product, but you are passive or reactive when you wait on the customer's demand for your product before you start looking for it. In whichever way, you are embarking on demand management. We move on to look at time horizon in forecasting. When you talk about time horizon in forecasting, you are talking about the period for which forecasting is made. When you talk about time horizon in forecasting, you are referring to the period for which forecasting is made. There are three basic time horizons in forecasting. There are three basic classifications of time horizon in forecasting, and these are: 1, short time horizon; 2, intermediate or mid-time horizon; 3, long-time forecasting horizon. These are the three classifications of time horizon in forecasting. We are saying that there are three classifications of time horizon in forecasting: the short time horizon, the intermediate or medium time horizon, and the long time forecasting time horizon. We start with the first one, which is the short time horizon. When you talk about short time, you are talking about the forecasting that is made in order to meet the day-to-day running of the activities of the business. When you talk about short-term horizon forecasting, you are talking about the forecasting that is a backup on that is undertaken in order to meet the day-to-day running of the activities of the organization. And this could involve the inventory management, the production plan, as well as resources requirement planning. The goal of the short-term horizon is to handle unexpected shift in demand in an efficient or economic manner. We talk about intermediate or medium time horizon. The intermediate or medium time horizon is actually adopted in order to take care of the change in sales pattern of product family lines. When there is change, because it is not a short time, it is not in the day-to-day running operation of the business, but you could have various production pattern or you could have various sales pattern. For you to now predict what happened within the short period of various products or various sales products in the same line of family, you are thinking of an intermediate or medium time planning. So we said that intermediate or medium time planning, it is used for forecasting sales pattern for product family, requirement and availability of workers, and resources requirement over a given period. Then we move on to the third type of planning horizon or forecasting horizon, which is the long-term horizon. When you talk about the long-term horizon, it is a long-term strategic plan of the organization. It is a long-term strategic plan of the organization where the fixed cost of the company is becoming a variable cost. Because we take note that our plants, our facilities are taken to be a fixed cost because they do not change with the level of output. But in a long time, where you need to increase your production capacity, your fixed cost may eventually become a variable cost. So the long-term strategic plan that is put in place in order to meet the long-run change in production pattern is what we refer to as the long-term forecast horizon. We now say this relates primarily to strategic issues involving a firm major production facility. It is related to long-term decision on transfer technology, siting of new production plants, and others. These are what we refer to as long-term strategic planning. We now want to look at characteristics of forecast. What are those features that you will see in a forecast before you can say this is forecast? And we refer to it as characteristics of forecast. One, they are usually not accurate. When you forecast figure, the exact figure you forecast may not be the actual figure, may not be the same thing as the actual figure. So a forecast, there is some degree of error. So when you forecast is not always accurate. So one of the characteristics of a forecast figure is that it is not always accurate. You may forecast that you are going to sell 20 cartons, but you may be able to sell 19.5 cartons or 20.5 cartons or 20.1 cartons. So in most cases, forecasts are usually not accurate. They may be very close to accuracy, but they are usually not accurate. Number two, a good forecast should not be a single number. A full forecast should be a range. For instance, you could not just forecast that you are going to sell 20 cartons of beer by February. That you are using a single figure, but rather you could say that you can sell between 20 to 23 cartons. In other words, you are not using a single figure in order for you to forecast. So for a forecast to be a good forecast, it must not be a single number, but it must be a range of a number that also takes cognizance or that also make provision for some error term that could occur. So when you are forecasting and you are relying on a single figure, it will not be a good forecast. So for you to have a good forecast, you may be forecasting based on a range of number between 10 to 15, between 15 to 20, between 20 to 30. So when you say your figure will fall in between those figures, then you are making a good forecast. So a good forecast must not be a single number, but will be a range of a number. Number three, forecasting on aggregate basis are more accurate. When you are forecasting the total capacity of your organization, you are likely to be more accurate than when you are forecasting a single product line of your business. So when you forecast the aggregate aspect of the organization, it tends to be more accurate than when you forecast a single line of product or a single line of business or an individual event in the organization. So a better forecast should be an aggregate forecast rather than a singular forecast of an event in an organization where you are dealing on 20 products in your product line. When you focus on the 20 products, it tends to be more accurate than when you just base your forecast on a single individual item. Then number 4, the longer your forecast horizon, the lesser the accurate the forecast will be. When you are forecasting for 20 years, there are likely tendency that what you forecast for 20 years may not actually be the real thing, because 20 years is a long period. You don't know the intervening variables that will have altered the 20 years time. So the shorter the period of your forecast, the more accurate your forecast will be. But the longer the period of your forecast, the likely tendency of the accuracy of your forecast. Then a good forecast should not exclude known information. Where you have a known figure with respect to future events, you should put it into consideration and don't use a forecast figure to override a known figure. These are the characteristics of forecast that we have been able to discuss about. Then we now move on to types of forecast. Forecast here can be classified into 2. We have what is called the subjective forecasting method, and we have the objective forecasting method. When you talk about types of forecast here can be classified into 2, or predictive method can be classified into 2. We have the subjective forecasting method and we have the objective forecasting method. So let's take the first one, which is the objective forecasting method. And when you talk about objective forecasting method, you are talking about the forecast based on human judgment, based on human intuition, based on human experience. It is not an empirical way. It is a forecast based on the mindset, based on the experience of the person, based on the knowledge of the person that is forecasting it. So we refer to it as a subjective forecast because it is a forecast based on human judgment and not an empirical tool that is used to judge. It is based on the intuition of the person that is making that particular forecast. And examples of subjective forecasting are as follows. Examples of subjective forecasting method are as follows. 1, sales force composites. When you talk about sales force composites, the level of sales you get from an organization, of a business or of a product, the degree of sales you have on a particular product, you could use it to actually forecast or predict the level of sales that you get on that product in subsequent year. Maybe you look at how people demand for your product during rainy season this year. You look at how people demand for your product during rainy season this year. You could use that to now predict the demand for your product for rainy season next year. So in that case, you are looking at the sales force composite forecast. In that case, the information of the sales force can be relied on as a good subjective source of forecasting product demand. Customer survey. When you talk about customer survey simply means obtaining information. The information you obtain from customer could be used to predict future events. So when information is obtained, when data is collected from customer, and the sole data collected from the customer based on the perception of that customer could be used to project future events. We refer to that as customer survey. We also talk about other examples of subjective forecasting, which include jury of executive opinion. When you talk about the jury of executive opinion, we are saying that the opinion of an expert in a particular way, the opinion of an expert in a particular field of study could be used to predict future events. In a circumstance where a product that needs to be produced does not have a previous history, when a new product needs to be produced and it does not have a previous history, an expert in that particular product could give his opinion, and the opinion of that expert in that particular line of business could be used to predict the demand for the product, for that particular product. In that case, we are calling it the jury of executive opinion. That is the opinion of an expert in a particular line in a particular specialization where there is no existing information in order to predict future events. We refer to it as subjective opinion, subjective forecasting based on jury of executive opinion. Then we have what is called the Delphi method. The Delphi method is also synonymous to the jury of executive opinion. But the difference between the Delphi method and the jury of executive opinion is that Delphi method involves experts from various fields of study, where experts from various fields of study uses the available information in order to predict into the future. We refer to it as Delphi method of subjective forecasting. You know, initially I did mention to you that forecasting can be classified into two, into the subjective forecasting method and two, into the objective forecasting method. And we've discussed about the subjective forecasting method. This is the forecasting based on the judgment of that individual, the intuition of that individual, the intuition, the knowledge of that personal person that is making that prediction. But now we are talking about the second one, which is the objective forecasting method. And when you talk about the objective forecasting method, you are talking about the use of empirical tools. You are talking about the use of empirical tools in order to predict into the future. In other words, it has to do with the use of the forecast figure that is already available in order to make future demand, in order to make future prediction. And this will involve the use of moving average, exponential smoothing, time series analysis, regression, VAC, veto error correction model, veto autocorrection model, and all other model in order to predict into the future. So these are the lecture on study section 3, forecasting concept. Thank you. We meet again in the next class. Thank you.